Quite a long time ago I made a video showing how to build a simple indicator, and I used the step-by-step tutorial method, and I did that for MT4. Until now I haven't created the same video for MT5. So today I'm going to do a step-by-step process to build the same indicator in MT5. Just to refresh, this is the indicator that I built as a demonstration in MT4. Let me just make these lines a little heavier so that they are easier to see. So we have a fast moving average line shown in red, a slow moving average line shown in yellow, a histogram between them which is red if the fast moving average is below the slow moving average, and yellow if the fast moving average is above the slow moving average. And there is an unseen signal moving average line which show the inputs to this, which is at a period of 5 bars. And if that faster moving average is not in alignment with the slow and fast moving average here, then we get a gap in the channel. This is the same indicator that we're going to create today in Metatrader 5. Looks slightly different, but the concepts are the same. It's the same slow moving average and fast moving average, the same channel in between which changes color, and a gap when the signal moving average line crosses between the two. The differences we're going to see are because there are differences in capabilities between MT4 and MT5, some new language features, and some of those features will actually make it simpler to create this indicator than it was in Metatrader 4. First, let's use a wizard to create an outline of the indicator. I'm going to create a subfolder. And now I'll just use the wizard to create a custom indicator here. Now I'm not going to add any parameters here. I prefer to add those in the code editor later. And this indicator goes in the main window, so I don't need to select separate window. So the wizard has created these properties. There's the copyright that I added in the wizard, website link, it's beginning with version number 1, and because I said this was not a separate window, there's the property indicator chart window. The indicator uses 3 moving averages: fast, slow, and a signal. So first let's create the inputs to specify the period and the type of these moving averages. The defaults I'm using are all EMA, and the periods are 5, 13, and 34 for the signal, fast, and slow moving averages. And these are just the 4th, 6th, and 8th Fibonacci numbers. There's nothing important about them. I'm just using them for the demonstration. So you can see I've added comments beside each input. By default, when you create an indicator or an EA, the input window on the indicator, when you open it, will show the variable name. But by adding a comment after the input statement, then this comment will appear instead, and that's a lot more user-friendly. I've also used enums for the method rather than, as some people do, use integers. Again, this is much more user-friendly because it creates a simple drop-down and the user can select from the available values, and it also helps with validation that we don't get an invalid input. Now we need an array where we can store the moving average values for each of these calculations. So these are simple, dynamically sized arrays. Then we need a handle to associate to each of the technical indicator calculations. And then in the init section, we establish a handle to each of these calculations. So for each handle, I've attached the moving average calculation for the symbol, time frame, the number of periods specified in the input. I'm having 0 shift using the method for the moving average calculation from the input, and I'm using the closing price for all of these. Then, because we have created these handles to technical indicators, I'll just clean up by adding a dinit section to remove those handles. Now this is a step-by-step video, so I'm not just going to create the entire indicator at once. Let's just start by putting one moving average on screen. And I'm going to start with the slow moving average. So we need a buffer to store the information and a plot to show the information on the screen. The moving average is a simple indicator, so we only need one buffer and one plot on the screen. Now add the properties for drawing the moving average on screen. I'm drawing this as a line. I'm adding a label, slow moving average. I'm going to make this line grey, a solid line, and a width of 4. The properties for color, style, and width can all be modified in the indicator input screen. The label appears there but can't be changed. Also note all of these indicators, indicator type, label, they all include 1 because this line is the first indicator. But now we add the index buffer. And buffer 0 maps to indicator number 1. So here I'm mapping the slow buffer to indicator 0, and this is indicator data. By attaching this buffer to the indicator, we will be mapping the values from the slow buffer to the indicator plot on screen. This will also dynamically resize that buffer depending on the number of bars on our chart. Now, you would also expect normally that the number of periods in the slow buffer is greater than the number in the fast, which is greater than the number in the signal, but we can't be sure of that. So I'm going to just add an indicator and calculate so that I know which of those 3 is the largest. Also, there's no point in plotting from the very first bar on the chart, which will be well to the left, because we can't calculate moving averages before all 3 of these have enough data to calculate. So we're just going to set the beginning bar on the chart where we will begin plotting. So here all I've done is say that the beginning for the plot, by using the plot index set integer function, for plot number 0 begins at max period, which we calculated here. Now in the on calculate section, the first thing I do is check for the is stopped flag. Is stopped will be set if Metatrader wants to stop this indicator, and we should check that flag to make sure that we don't get into a tight loop, cause a problem, and that we can stop quickly when that flag has been set. So I'm just going to check it there, and we will check it a few more times throughout the calculation. You also can't calculate moving averages if we don't have enough data. So I'm just going to compare rates total, which is the number of bars that are available to us, against the max period that I calculated earlier. And if we don't have enough to calculate all 3 of the moving averages, then we'll just return, and this will come back next cycle until we eventually have enough rates available. Something else to check, because the moving averages are being calculated in the background, and when you first start the indicator, they may not have caught up to all of the rates that are available. So we just add some lines to check if the bars calculated in each of these technical indicators is not equal to the rates total or is less than the rates total, then we'll return and we'll cycle around again. By returning 0, we're effectively saying we haven't calculated any bars yet, so prev calculated will come back as 0, and it will be like we're still coming in for the first time until eventually all of these have calculated all of the bars up to rates total. We're going to have to copy values from those technical indicators into the buffers we set up. So here we're going to calculate how many bars need to be copied. We could just copy everything every time, but that's going to be inefficient and cause a lot of overhead inside Metatrader. So firstly, if prev calculated is less than or equal to 0, then this is our first run through the loop. And if prev calculated is more than the total number of rates, then that's probably because we've reached the maximum bars setting for the chart and dropped some bars from the chart. In either case, this is a situation where we want to copy all bars, and so we set copy bar count to the total number of bars available. If we aren't copying everything, then we simply want to copy the number of new bars that have been created, which is rates total minus the prev calculated, but also so that we catch the current bar that is changing constantly, or if that bar has just changed, we simply add 1 to our copy bars. And that gives us the number of bars that we're going to copy from the technical indicator into the buffer. Next, I do one more check for is stopped, and then I copy the buffer from the slow handle technical indicator for the number of bars I've specified into my slow buffer. I'm only drawing the one line on screen so far, so I'm ignoring the other two moving average calculations. And that's all we need to do. I'm just going to compile and then go back to Metatrader, where we can find our indicators now. I'll add this to the chart. Take the defaults, and there is the moving average line that we've just created. Let's go back to the editor now and add that second moving average line. It's more of the same, so we'll go through this quickly. First thing to do, though, is increase the number of buffers. We now have a second moving average, so we have 2 buffers, and we're going to also plot this on screen, so we have 2 plots. We add the information for the fast moving average indicator. This is indicator number 2. Now map that buffer to the index buffer. This is index buffer number 1 for index number 2. Set the beginning also for this plot. I'm setting it at max period the same. We've already handled calculating bars and checking that everything's calculated for all 3 of the moving averages. And there's no change to the number of bars being copied. So just add another copy buffer statement for the fast handle and the fast buffer. And that's everything we need to add the second line. So we'll compile that back to Metatrader, and we can now see the fast line as well as the slow line. Now we'll add the filled channel to the chart. This is a little different to the simple line indicators we had earlier. The filled channel takes 2 buffers, one showing the high and one showing the low value, but it is only one plot. So we'll increase our number of buffers now to 4 and increase the plots to 3. So we're drawing 3 things on screen. I'm also going to put the filled channel ahead of the 2 lines. So I'm going to move these numbers up by 1. I could put it at the end, but then it's going to draw on top of those 2 lines and you won't see the fast and slow moving average lines. By drawing it first, then the fast and slow moving average lines draw on the edges of the channel and you can still see them. For the channel, I'm using the type draw filling. Now this is one of the features of Metatrader 5 that's not available in Metatrader 4, and this is what creates the channel that looks solid rather than the histogram appearance that we had in Metatrader 4. For the label, I have included 2 labels, channel fast MA, channel slow MA, because remembering that this takes 2 values, by specifying both of these separated by a semicolon inside the quotes, it will actually show 2 labels in the data window. And then the color for a filled channel is different depending whether the first buffer is above or below the second buffer. So I'm saying yellow color when the first buffer is above and red when the first buffer is below. And these are just separated by a comma. I'm also adding 2 more buffers to store the moving average values. Now the values in the buffer fast channel and buffer slow channel are the same as the values in buffer fast and buffer slow, but because they're mapped to the indicators, it causes issues and conflict when we try to use the same buffer for 2 indicators. So I'm just creating a separate buffer. Again, because I have put the channel first, it's going to take the first 2 buffers. So I've inserted the 2 new set index buffer statements at positions 0 and 1 and pushed the others up to 2 and 3, and they'll be consumed in sequence. Then I'm going to add 1 more plot index set integer. And these are all identical, so I can just duplicate that. No need to insert one at the beginning. So all 3 of my plots now begin at the max period bar. Now I insert 2 more copy buffer statements. I'm still copying from the fast handle, although I've created a second channel to hold the data, and I'm still copying from the slow handle into the buffer slow channel. And I didn't mention earlier, but in all of these cases, if the copy buffer fails, so if I get a result less than 0, I'm returning 0, which will cause this to loop around next time and try again. And that should be everything we need. If I compile and go back, now I have a channel. And you can see where the fast line is below the slow line, I'm getting a red channel. And when the fast line is above the slow line, I get the yellow channel. So next we want to create the gaps in this ribbon where the signal line crosses. The signal line isn't displayed, but we still need a buffer to hold the values for that moving average. So I'm going to increase the buffers by 1. I can leave the indicator plots the same. Again, it's not showing, so I don't need to add any further indicators to the screen. I have all of the inputs. I created the buffer earlier to store the signal data, and I've created the signal handle already. But I do need a set index buffer statement. This isn't being displayed, but by adding the set index buffer statement, it will dynamically size that array as the number of bars on screen changes. So I'm just adding buffer number 4, which is the signal buffer indicator data. To blank out the moving average lines, we're going to need to scan each bar to determine if the conditions are met, and then set the moving average value for that bar to an empty value so the moving average line doesn't display. So I'm just going to create another variable for the starting bar to run this comparison that we can use to go through a loop. In this case, we're counting up from the start bar. So when we copy all bars across, we set the start bar to the first plotted var, which is max period in our case. And in the other cases, we just overlap with the last bar to make sure that we're catching updates to the currently open bar or the bar that's just closed. We're using a signal buffer now, so we need to copy the values from that moving average into the signal buffer. And then we insert a loop to set the values to empty when needed. Now I'm checking is stopped again here because we're about to go into a loop. I want to make sure we're not tying up resources. Beginning with the start bar, going into the last bar that we have available. And again, I'm checking is stopped at every iteration here. What I'm saying is that if the fast buffer is above the slow buffer, but the signal is below the fast buffer, or the other way around. In other words, if the 3 moving averages are not arranged in the order of slow, fast, signal, then we want to set the fast buffer and the slow buffer to the empty value. And we should be able to compile that now. Come back here, And if I zoom this a little, you can see that in this area, the moving average lines have stopped, because this is where the signal line has crossed the fast moving average. And maybe I can just add a moving average, a fast moving average onto the chart so that you can see what I'm talking about. A 5-period moving average, exponential. I'll make it a nice dark line. And this is the point where our 2 moving average lines stopped being drawn, when the signal line crossed the fast, and they didn't start to be drawn again until the fast line crossed the slow line and they all became aligned once more. So that takes care of removing the moving average lines, but we still have the channel showing. So now let's just remove the channel value that is occurring between these gaps in the moving average. We'll do that the same way. So we set the fast channel and the slow channel to the empty value. We'll compile, come back, and now we have gaps. I'll just turn off the tracking, zoom out a little, and if I scroll, then you can see we have these gaps anytime the lines are not, or the 3 moving averages are not aligned. You can download the complete code used here and also the code from the earlier MT4 version from our website. There's a link in the description below that will take you to both of those. If you have any questions, or if there's something else you'd like us to cover in the future, please leave a comment. I hope you found this useful, and thank you for watching.